Sure. Well, welcome. Welcome, Harry Derbitsky. Welcome, everybody else who's joining us here tonight for the last call of this year, the last webinar of this year in Three Principles Conversations. And this webinar with you, Harry, is one of the extra ones which are around the theme of addiction and alcoholism, which I've been hosting fortnightly and partly in support of the conference on the first Three Principles conference on addiction that we are both part of the I don't know quite what to call it, the organising committee, the steering committee.
And we're both presenting as well, I think.
That's right, and that's taking place in May next year. But it's actually been tremendous fun doing these calls and having lots of different people with lots of different takes on addiction. You've been a guest on one of my webinars before, Harry, and you are also, as well as you also host your own webinars on addiction fortnightly, and you're an author, and I think you're probably very well known by people likely to be watching this call, but whether or not that's the case, I'm going to hand it over to you to say something about yourself and the topic, which was along the lines of, sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, the relevance of Syd Banks' work in relation to alcoholism and addiction recovery. So over to you, Harry.
Right, thank you. What's interesting is I also have my book, which is called Evolution Addiction Recovery, is also in Spanish. And so in here I've been handing it out to people who only speak Spanish. And that was a surprise. And when that happened, that was spiritual in the sense that I had written the book in English, and then a Dr. Campos from Colombia offered to translate it for me. And I thought, wow, Spanish too. And it has, like, that's a little bit of a gift from life. And that's what we're looking for, is these gifts that life gives us. And it elevated my feeling towards the book and elevated what I could share with that. Also, what Christian has mentioned, that we do a addiction, alcoholism, and Three Principles webinar series, basically the opposite Sundays that Christian is doing. And we've have now well over a million minutes after show views. So our strength is not only the show, but the after show, because it's an educational resource for people, free educational resource for people. And so I hope some of you may, if you're interested, will see it. And on that, there are webinars and podcasts. And one of the webinars and podcasts is Syd Banks' talk on thought and alcoholism in the early 1980s. And that was interesting. I was looking for it, and Christian had it, a little fuzzy, and she sent it to me, and I cleaned it up, and it has Christian just on our webinar part of it. It has over 2,000 views now. So that's yeah. I was quite pleased with that. So just to give you a little background in who I am and what I do, one of the interesting, I guess two interesting things is that in the 1970s, I moved to Salt Spring Island and became a close friend to Syd and a student of Syd Banks. And in that movement, I was only interested in the spiritual nature of truth. It wasn't the principles then. It was just, and that was Syd's major message, was the spiritual nature of life before the thinking. That's where he was pointing us all to. But I really didn't know what he was talking about. All I was doing was listening to a feeling. And then when I had my own personal insight on Salt Spring Island, I experienced that everything is one. And in that oneness, it was pure silence. So that's what I'm going to define as mind, pure silence. That's what you're looking for all the answers to addiction, the fighting with your wife, overeating, anxiety, etc. The silence inside of you will bring you what you need. And when I had that experience, it missed a certain component of the three principles. In other words, I experienced that life was a spiritual reality, fact. But I didn't, my insight and my experience did not include thought. And so I was still a loose cannon, if you know what I mean, because I didn't understand how it navigated towards mental health or innate wisdom within people. And so when I went on my journey with Syd and everybody else, the psychologists came in, and they took it in a totally different flavor. And the first thing was noticeable was they were professionals. They had jobs that the world wanted to hear what they were doing. And they had a message that could relate to the world. And they still have a message, and they've made this message and taken it out. But it's still not Syd Banks, guys. That's just the level of consciousness of where it is at now. It will grow and evolve. And it's in the purity of the principles that we actually get this continual growing. And so somewhere along the line, I have lost track of Syd. Not that I didn't appreciate it, but I didn't really see it as a connection to the three principles. But as I had my troubles and all this stuff happening, at the age of 69, oh, that's quite a few years later, I all of a sudden, I saw that I was listening to this talk by Elsie and Chip. It was called Genesis, Christian. And on this Genesis talk, while Elsie is talking about the importance of Syd Banks, I said to myself, because I was in a very quiet state of mind while I was listening, I said to myself, I wonder what it was like when I was really listening to Syd. And all of a sudden, I went all the way back before all of that thinking, all of those beliefs, all of that stuff. And all of a sudden, I went, oh, there you are. You haven't left me at all. You've just been waiting for me to wake up to who and what that is. And immediately upon going back to really listening to Syd without the and all that stuff, my life transformed. All of a sudden, when I was teaching, people were healed. I went, oh, that doesn't happen before, occasionally, but not like. All of a sudden, I'm working in all these projects. Before, it was like trying to get projects was difficult. All of a sudden, they were coming to me. And the more I gave away, the more came. And what was really ironical, Christian, was I gave away all the money. So anything that paid, I gave to the people who were helping and so on. They were so poor. In the addiction world, people are so poor. I like poor people. That's my crowd. The rich people, cool, and I love that too. But I like the poor people. And so I gave them. And the more money I gave away, the more came through the back door. I went, isn't this ironic? But it was because of sharing. And Syd once said to me on Salt Spring Island, I'll always be taken care of because of that, the level that I share love out into the world. I didn't understand what he was talking about then because, of course, I was insecure about money and how I could fit into this paradigm that he was suggesting would help everybody. So what happened was I had certain competitive advantages. 69, I'm ripe with all the talents that I've been developing. Fantastic. I also have all these stories about Syd. And I also started to embrace his teaching fresh. And that's the thing, when you bring Syd along with the three principles, they have a different aliveness. You become a continual student. And you start to see things like, gee, I'm really sharing something beautiful, but nothing compared to Syd. Syd's just at another dimension. And then I'm writing my second book now, Christian. It's about 20 chapters in now. And it's sparked by so much of what Syd is sharing with me. So he has become more alive now than when he would than 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. Because he epitomized something that we all want, that you can be an ordinary human being and have an enlightenment experience. And in that enlightenment experience, he saw the connection between spirit and psychology, and it became the same. It didn't matter to him. He had to go down, of course, when the psychologists and psychiatrists came, way down. But he did. He went down to that level, met them, and then slowly started to train different people. And while he was training people in psychology, and for them which is really the foundation of what we have created up to this point, I didn't like psychology. It was, talking about problems was a pain in the rear end. So I went into the indigenous world. That's where I went. And Syd loved that. He loved that I had a niche. Nobody else was interested in it. Nobody else was doing it. And I went into that. I followed my nature. And that's what Syd is trying to tell you. Don't listen to the words and memorize the phrases. Find your own nature. What is it like to be you? And as I followed that, I had this crazy question. Well, how does the mystical level of the indigenous crowd connect with the three principles? And that took a long, long, long time to amalgamate. Just like how does spirit and spiritual connect with psychology? That took a long, long time for me to see. A lot of people got like that. A lot of people didn't get it at all. But it took, and I just kept moving and pointing myself, moving. But all through the troubles, all through the divorce and the bankruptcy and losing your friends and all that type of stuff, and all through all of that, that defining experience I had on Salt Spring carried me through. Even when I gave up, I never gave up because I had that spiritual light and it was guiding me. And then when I was ready, it only took 35, 40 years, guys. And of course, I'm trying to tell you, it won't take you that long if you smarten up. And then once it happened, it was like, it didn't matter what the past was, because it was now. And that's the trick. Wake up every day. That was yesterday. Today is today. Fresh and new. If you bring in the past experiences into the present diction, then what you have is a past camouflage over what God or mind is presenting to you in the moment. And of course, you can't be awake. So it always starts with an alive feeling inside of you. That's the key to Syd's teaching. It's inside, it's inside, it's inside. And what is inside? Pure thought. Purity of thought. Original, formless thought. And that emanates out, and we grab hold of it, and we use it wisely or unwisely. When we use it wisely, we don't have to understand it, mind, thought, and concept. We just feel like we're flowing with the world and what it presents. And we're not letting our psychological compounds hold us down. On the other hand, when we use it unwisely, which is the world of psychology, then we are learning that that's not so smart. That's not the way to be. Even though everybody else says it is the way to be, that's normal, it isn't. It's unnormal. And when we learn that we don't have to take our thoughts seriously, that we can let them go or not hold on to them, or we can ignore them, or we can act on them, whatever we want to do. And that is the beauty of us as human beings, creating our separate realities, creating our dreams, and finding out who we are. It turns out we don't know. And the question is, that's your journey. You're there to find out who you are. When you do, you see how it works. See, Syd had in the Enlightened Gardener, they asked him, what's the difference between what the psychologists do and what you're teaching? Well, he says the psychologists are talking about what you do with the principles. But what I'm talking about is that the principles exist and how they work. And that's what I want you guys to see. When you see how mind, thought, and consciousness work, you mix it in the right way, wisely. When you don't understand how mind, thought, and consciousness works, you mix it unwisely, or you lose contact with the essence of who you are. Yet here's the joke. I don't really know what mind, thought, and consciousness is. I just have a sense of them and do the best I can. And that's the trick, guys. You want to walk free psychologically? Just do the best you can. No more. And let the spirit or mind do the rest. Just let it do it. You do your best. You know whether you're doing your best. I know when I'm doing my best. And what Christian has found out is if you share, you grow. So all the people who are sharing, she's not saying she's enlightened, but she's saying, hey, this is a very cool medium for me to grow. And that's what happens. She grows because she shares. So the first part of the puzzle, inside. The second part, to complete the circle, share. Very, very simple. And if Syd would say, if you can't share it with someone else, share it with yourself. And that's very profound. Very profound. And I'm here in Mazatlan for 2 weeks. It's called Stone Island. Only Mexicans around me. So they only speak Spanish. And I can't communicate with them. Yet I'm becoming friends with them. And I'm learning to hang out with Harry. And I'm seeing what type of balance I need. So when I get a little bit too staid, I grab the car and drive into Mazatlan, which is about an hour away. But I'm just playing with the silence. And it takes me to beautiful places, beaches that nobody's around, botanical gardens which nobody's around. And I'm just enjoying finding out that I can be quiet. Do you have to do something all the time? Well, you do when you're insecure, when you're chasing that intellect. But the spirit likes silence. Now, I was in the car with Syd once. I was feeling really good. I'm driving him around. And I had just had a lift in my level of consciousness. And I turned to him thinking that I really knew what I was talking about. which, by the way, in the past was quite common. Very common. And I said to him, gee, Syd, the spirit moves slow, doesn't it? That's like the inside moves slow. And he turned to me with a big smile and he said, yeah, really slow. So the inside moves slow, the intellect moves fast, and this is where everything comes from. And what is addiction? Running away from that. And when people see that, they then want to know, what do I do with this thing that's going on in my head? Thought. And on this talk that Syd went, he gave in the 1980s, it was very practical. I was a little surprised, but I know he wasn't letting it fully out. He wanted it controlled so that the psychologists could get it, because they were dumb, really dumb. And so he wanted them to get that. And so his message was simple: change thought. And everything changes with it. I really highly recommend you listen to that talk. And you'll be surprised how simple it is. Yet, and 16 minutes of simplicity. Yet, that's all you need to know. Change thought. And of course, then we come up with intellectual thought versus, what do you mean, change thought? And the changing thought that he's talking about comes from inside, not from outside. Can I read something, Christian?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, let me see if I... Andy lowered his head shyly as he gathered his thoughts and straightened and said, if I were trying to help a neighbor, I would listen to his or her story very carefully and have lots of love for the individual and empathy for his state of mind and his suffering. But more importantly, I would try to show my neighbor that beyond wrongful thinking exists a whole and healthy inside. You really do believe that there is an innate wisdom that lies inside everyone, don't you? Janet queried. Yes, I do, Janet. That's why I am asking you to look at your own inner strengths, not your weaknesses. If you don't, you'll never allow yourself to see the innocent person that stands in front of you before the lostness took place. And just beyond that lostness lies a happy, mentally healthy, and wise person lost in a maze of wrongful thoughts. Cool, eh?
And was that from the Enlightened Gardener, Harry?
Enlightened Gardener Revisited.
Right, thanks.
Yeah, type of thing, which I'm into fair amount. So is there a question or two? I'm more than happy.
Yeah, it'd be lovely. Please do just unmute yourself if you want to come in and join in the conversation. We'd really appreciate that. And while we're waiting for people to do that, Harry, I was going to ask you for your comments, because I had this insight this week about, I spent many years before I came across the principles on a sort of spiritual quest, if you like. And I was on that quest because I had been told, and I was willing to believe that that was the answer to addiction. That was the thing that would keep me sober. And I didn't find anything until I stumbled into the principles. I didn't find anything that I felt I could trust and rely on. I just didn't experience it. And the minute I stumbled into the principles, I found some of that. And like you said, it's continued to grow and grow. It's been almost 9 years now. It's astonishing how much it changes and grows. But I did not come into it in the way that you're describing, of silence first. For me, it was psychology led me into the spiritual that I had previously been seeking. And it opened, made, and now I'm in a place where I'm not seeking, where I feel I have a life that I'm consistently happy, which by that I don't mean I'm happy every moment of every day, but there's a bedrock of contentment and happiness. And I have a sense of the spiritual in my life. I have a sense that who I am is not up for grabs, that I have the resources, the spiritual and emotional resources to deal with whatever might come my way. But it's that thing of the spiritual the psychological being the gateway to the spiritual. I'm interested if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, first of all, the spiritual and the psychological at one level is the same thing. Mm-hmm. So that automatically, I was describing my experience, which was I was a spiritual seeker. I wanted to know my relationship with God. I really didn't think I had any problems. Of course, but that's what I thought. I was naive. So that was the way I came in. And Syd said, well, you've come in spiritually, Harry, but most of the others, even on Salt Spring, Christian, came in psychologically. They were looking to fix a certain thing in their life. And then they, like you, embraced the combination of the two. But you have answered really the question of why the psychologist and the psychology has been relatively successful in the present world, because the present world wants that type of help. And then the ones who hear a little deeper, they want to go beyond just the psychological, I'm happy, but what else is there in life? Where does creativity come from? Where does the intuitive and the instinctual apply? What about my visions and my images of what I need and want? So what happens is, of course, we have seen your path is much more common than mine, but they arrive at the same place. Mm-hmm. So at a certain point, you had things you wanted to solve. I had things I wanted to solve spiritually. And then at a certain point, you notice I mentioned that my experience did not include thought. I was still a loose cannon. And then I started to do that. And when that happened, Christian, that was when Syd died. I said, I wonder what he's still talking about. And I started to see that the psychologists were talking about thought in a way that they started to teach me, and I started to elaborate. So I went this way to arrive at thought and my psychological problems, because I was noticing I was still misguided. And you went to this and then went to that. It's the same thing. It's all one. It's just, and of course you're Christian and I'm Harry. So of course, you did it your way and I did it my way. And you got to remember, Christian, you were a judge, I think anyway, and I was a hippie, long hair. That's two different realities here, I was a long-haired, afro, beard, hippie, and you were a distinguished member of the judicial system.
Well, I don't know about that. I was certainly a lawyer.
Yeah, I know, but you could see it would be a different approach. And the hippies were more interested in the exploration rather than the definition of. Psychology is the definition of, the exploration is the spiritual. It turns out, of course, we were explorers always, in both realms. And so that's why that's why there's different teachers, Christian. Like, I appeal to a certain student. let's say, a student who likes to soar a little bit. Others who are in the bandwagon of success, they're dealing more with people who want to, as you say, find out a little bit more about how they can be happy and where that happiness resides. And then they have a spiritual experience. But generally speaking, they get a little dissatisfied because it's just, where did it go? And then they start to go for more training and stuff. It's too much of that. Syd didn't like that. You have it inside you already, guys. That's what you have to realize. There's nothing wrong with learning from other people. Don't get me wrong. But I've only had one teacher. That's Syd Banks. None others. I have learned stuff from Elsie and Chip and, Dickin and little bits of this and that. But Syd's my only teacher. He's the only one. The others are lower emanations of stuff. But can I learn from them? Yeah, absolutely. Especially that which I am blind to. Yeah, and that's psychology. I am blind to, and they go, oh, look, there's a light. Oh, insight, revelation, fantastic. I want another one. Well, you have to wait. Yeah. What do you mean, wait? I only got 10 minutes. I want it now. So it turns out the patience, in spiritual, there's always hope. There's always patience. There's always perfection. Whatever is happening to me is God's design in perfection. So when I experience something, that's perfect. Well, that's a whole different attitude than I got a problem. If you've got I got a problem, you're in the psychological world. If you see the perfection of your flaws and your perfection of what life has given you, you just relax. It's going to work out. Hasn't it always? Of course it's going to work out. And as your level of consciousness rises, it gets easier. Why? Because you're not so stupid. And take my word for it. I was an authority on stupidity. So you're listening to a very stupid man. But luckily for me, so are you. Yeah. And I only mean that in a humorous way. Like Syd meant it when he says you have to see your own beauty. You have to feel your own gifts. Now what happens is when that happens, magic starts to come in. Magic, guys. I'm telling you, you have no idea how beautiful the world can be with this magic ingredient called truth. Truth is divine, unlimited. I don't even know who I am anymore. I look back 5 or 10 years ago and you know what I say, Christian? When did I drop all those bad habits? I wasn't working on them. See, the psychological took care of itself. Spiritually, it just takes care of itself. Now, like I said, I'm not for everybody, and I like that. And I'll give you an example. So I had this lady phone me up. She'd listened to a doctor in the 3P world. You could probably guess who it is in addiction. And I had come on her show, and I said, the talk was, all problems are caused by overthinking. All. Anyway, she liked what I said, and she happened to live in the same town as I did. So she phoned me up and says, let's get together. And I said, sure. And we got together and took care of details, and we met. And then she was on benzos, which is and the most powerful benzos there are. And the benzos are, you're supposed to be on a max, 2 weeks. She's been on it for 3 years. Nobody gets off this stuff. And she came and we started to talk. and I just talked like I did now. I hardly mentioned addiction and all this stuff, because she was really worried. And she'd been on drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, since she was 13, because she had anxiety. Seems to be a big word out there. I got anxiety. What is it, like a hamburger or something? So we started to talk. I'm not kidding. No, I didn't do this. Don't give me any credit, because it wasn't me. 2 meetings for an hour and a half each, she was off it. Boom. Then she has an appointment to see her psychiatrist, and her psychiatrist says, she says to him, I'm off it. He says, that's impossible. Nobody gets off this stuff like that. Nobody. He says, well, I'm off it. And then she tries to teach him something, which I told her was a bad mistake, and he wouldn't listen to any of it. That's it. See, he has beliefs, and these beliefs hold him prisoner, but he feels intellectually it holds his world together. See how we're doing that? We believe in these beliefs. What would Syd do? See these balloons of beliefs? Pop, pop, pop. That's psychology. Pop, pop, pop. And so she then was awful. But she still was wondering why she didn't feel perfect. Because she had to learn that what she had experienced really happened. It really happened to her. She had seen it, she'd been a part of it, but she didn't quite grasp that she had just been given a miracle. And so I said to her, well, has your life changed? Seem much calmer, much more calm. Yeah, she says, yeah. In fact, something unusual has happened. She was unemployed, working in the kitchen, and now, a month later, she's a part-time school teacher. And all the teachers are, she says, I don't understand it. I'm such a hyper person, and all the teachers are saying I'm so calm. I've never heard anything like that. And she still can't hear it. She can't hear it. It's so funny. How could she miss even that? But that's beliefs. She has a belief that she's an anxious person. Since 13, she's been on the drugs. When she lets go of that belief, when she finally sees who she is, she'll have the whole package. The happiness and the contentment. And with that, it just was amazing. Now, I didn't do that, but I pointed her towards her spiritual essence. And that's where she went. Now, Christian, you would say, or many would say, well, she was ready, obviously. And that's exactly correct. If obviously I could have said the same thing to someone else, Zippo. But she was asking the question, seriously, I am tired of being on these.
Yeah. I think that's a good point you make, Harry, that because, and in a way it underlines that it is a spiritual experience. That, and what I mean by that is it's not just you or I giving people information, because then you don't need to be ready particularly to receive information, but for that opening, that awakening to happen, I think there has to be well, it's from within, isn't it? I mean, we can, as you say, share what we know, we can share it open-heartedly, but we do not have the power to put it in someone else. It seems to me that perhaps that was what Syd meant when he said you can't give this stuff away. It meant you can't impose it on someone. You can't wave a magic wand and awaken them.
No, absolutely not. And the other part of that, Christian, is you and I, in the helping, sometimes people come and they get some and then they leave. We have to say, that was good. Not, they didn't get the whole packet. That was good. Because that's what was happening to Syd on Salt Spring. People would come, listen to him. This is in a book that he has published. Yeah, it's not published yet. He has 2 autobiographies. He has many books unpublished, but two. So the first, this document from the beginning to when his dear wife Barb died. And in it, it's continual. Someone would come, they'd get an insight, and they'd leave. And they'd just go and live happy and content. I think he would never hear from them again, but he knew they had heard something. In fact, he even suggested that the only ones that stayed were the dummies, because they, because they, wanted to, So we are continually sharing, and I don't mean just Christian and I, because we're on this woo stuff. No. Every one of us are sharing love, and then we don't see, and then sometimes it comes back, and we go, oh, the person says, you really helped me. Oh, I didn't even have any idea. So we don't look for results. That's bullshit. You look for sharing, love, and understanding. You share energy of love in the best way you possibly can. That's it. That's all I'm doing in the best way I possibly can. Being in Mazatlan or Stone Island has been good because it's quieted me down. Obviously, I'm looking for fresh, new juice.
Harry, I just want to invite anyone who's on the call. It'd be lovely to hear from some of you, or especially if you have any questions for Harry or anything that you might have heard tonight. Please do come in or even just tell us what brought you here tonight. Well, I'm saying tonight. It's tonight in Scotland where I am. It's obviously the morning where you are, is it, Harry?
Yeah, it's noon. Noon. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Thomas.
Hi. I've really enjoyed tonight's call, and I actually only jumped on at the last minute because I saw it advertised on the Inside Out page. The thoughts have been running through my head today of what can I do to make this day more meaningful or kind of more worthwhile. And I feel that kind of jumping on this call has served that purpose for me, at least for today. Sorry, I feel a little bit nervous actually. Because I guess for a long time I have felt that spiritual sense has evaded me. But here, listening to you and Christine, I'm kind of feeling it again. I don't know. It's, to me, it feels like maybe a warmth or a brightness or even just a sense that as of late, I'm having the experience that there's an energy here that's trying to help me and kind of propelling me forward. And I've not, I've never really experienced that before until now. So that's really nice. It's as though the underlying benevolence of life has always been there, but I've never really known of its presence, and now it's starting to come to the forefront, which is really nice.
That's the healing power. That's God.
Yeah.
That's it. The more alive you are with that, the less you'll care about the outside world and what you think, because that is what drives us into freedom.
Yeah.
And so the trick is, what has happened is you've awakened because that's who you are anyway.
Mm.
And the more you can sense the aliveness within, an alive feeling within,
Yeah.
the healthier you're going to be. because you have guidance, internal guidance. You notice Syd says it's inside, but he's talking about internal guidance, not intellectual guidance, internal. And what's great is any decision, any thought, you automatically know how it fits in because you've got the right piece first. This is alive and it supersedes everything else. And it takes me to something I desperately need, something to hold on to. I need something to hold on to. I am not that great, that strong. That alive feeling is the only thing that's real. So hold on to it, let it explore it, and always remember that when things go a little down, you'll get up a lot quicker because you're aware of where the answer lies. That's its message. You have to be aware of where the answer lies. It ain't in that, and it ain't in this. So where is it?
Yeah.
And you've defined it. And just let it emerge and grow. And don't complain. You know, not fast enough. You know, remember, real slow. This real fast, that real slow. And I'm telling you, real slow is surprisingly fast. Kind of like, how is nothing everything? It is.
Yeah.
But you can't explain that intellectually. Einstein, when he saw that everything was energy, you can rest assured he was in a divine state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And in my book, I describe how he did thought experiments. So he was able to visualize stuff that nobody else could. And for him, those were realities. So he did thought experiments. So he understood where creativity came from. And the fact was that he was happy to be the smartest human being on the face of the earth, maybe ever. So that's the way he manifested it. You are also a genius, you know, and so you will manifest it in your genius way. I've learned, like, I have hardly been in the addiction field very short period of time. And I have never been addicted, theoretically. But I had learned like a genius. I just absorbed. I was fascinated. And who taught me? Well, those who were addicted. I listened. What's on their minds? Oh, I'll try this. 3 principles, Well, that was a snoozer. Let's see, let's try something else, you know. And you said, or here's the big one, Thomas. I started my first course right in the main gut of Vancouver. Is one of the most heavily addicted areas. Needles are everywhere. People are living on the streets. And right in the middle, I'm doing this very small recovery program stuff type of thing. And I forget what I was going to say. I had something really good. What was I talking about? Maybe you can bring
it. That you came into addiction even though you weren't addicted.
So they would explain to me what was on their mind. But here it is. This is very important. So this was like the neatest thing in my life. Honestly, I was just, wow, I love this area. And in the past, I was terrible in it. Terrible. And now, wow, this is really interesting. And every week, I would prepare myself because it was so important for me to give my best. 1 week, I got caught up in my indulgences, the stuff we sometimes, our bad habits.
Yeah.
And I came in low, and you should have seen the meeting. Stinks like poo-wee. I went, I'm never going to do that. I've got to go in bringing the best. Because if you go into any situation not bringing in your best, you're to blame. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have answers for everything, but you have to be there with that alive feeling inside. Not a memory of it, in the moment. Being alive with that feeling. And what you describe is perfect. Perfection. I couldn't do it as good as you did because you were feeling it right now. That's it. Just keep doing that and watch it emerge. Watch it grow. And don't just watch your play. The word I have now that I use a lot is I do a lot of observing. Just observe how it works. Not how you intellectually think about it. That's a belief. But how it works. And once you see how it works, Thomas, you can use it wisely. Like a hammer. If you hit it with the wrong end, you go, why isn't the nail going in? Or you put your hand on top of the nail and go boom, 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 and go, oh, that wasn't great. So after a while, you learn how to use the hammer. That's what the three principles are. Tools that you mix to create a oneness experience or an alive feeling within. Same thing. How can oneness experience be the same thing as being inside? I can't explain it to you. You have to figure it out for yourself. Lucky for me. Yeah. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just sit with it, and you can get my book, or something, and we have tons of free videos and stuff. Brilliant. We're talking on topics that nobody talks about.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking actually when I first logged in. That this is kind of a radical area, isn't it?
Well, radical because it is radical because the world is pretending about it. A, it knows the answer. B, that the psychologists, AA, et cetera, know the answer. AA had high success rates when Bill Wilson had his initial experience, but now it's having lower and lower success rates.
Right.
We have something to offer, but we have to see it ourselves. Unfortunately, 3P doesn't see it yet, but they're getting there. They're heading in the right direction. We're evolving and so on. But we're just a level of consciousness. That's the beauty. You're just a level of consciousness. So as a collective, and that's why the conference that Christian mentioned I'm so positive about it. I don't agree with everything that they're doing, but I'm very positive about developing the community. I want people to be together, working together, helping each other. You see here, this is Christian and I are community. We're helping each other. I'm on her show, she came on my show. We're sharing our viewpoints, and we're learning to get along. Turns out 3P people don't get along so well unless they just,
Yeah. I was wondering if you could say something about anxiety, because I experience quite high levels of anxiety.
Well, anxiety, many years, like you understand, I was in the indigenous world. So in that world, it has a whole different feel to what we're talking about. But this elder lady asked me, "What's worry, Harry?" And I said, "Well, worry is nothing." Worry and anxiety, of course, are the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, "That's nothing. It's just you have a thought, and you grab hold of it, and you don't let go of it. So she says, so what's the answer? Well, I says, isn't it obvious? Let go of it. And be aware when you ask the question, what is anxiety? That's your wisdom already observing that that's something you want to get rid of a little bit. Your consciousness will automatically, remember, most of my change has been when I wasn't paying attention to it. It's strange, isn't it? Because the world teaches you got to focus on your problem. But what basically happens is once consciousness is awakened, intuitively, you start to see more and more. That's the way it is with addiction. People get addicted and they go out and then they go back in. But as their consciousness rises, they start to pick tricks of the puzzle. See, it's a puzzle. And the pieces. Theoretically, you understand what I'm saying, but how does it apply to your mind is what you want to know. And how does your mind think and deal with and do this stuff? And as you start to see, oh, here's where I fall into the pit. Once you see where you fall into the pit, you start to say, well, maybe I can catch it a little earlier.
Yeah.
And once you catch it a little earlier, then you get to the simplicity of what Syd says. It's just changed thought. That's all he said. Yeah. Listen to that talk by Syd. He'll give you the answer to your anxiety better than I can. Change thought. But he'll explain it from spiritual change thought, where I'm doing the best I can in the moment.
Yeah.
So listen to that talk by Syd. It's on our Addiction, Alcoholism, and 3 Principles YouTube channel.
Okay. I like, just to jump in, I like how you said, what was it you said, that for you, change or insight happened when you weren't paying attention to it. And I think I really like that because I'm quite intellectual and I guess I find that I'm most of the time trying to figure something out or get something, and I think that's okay. Maybe I can make progress that way, but I also like the not paying attention to myself thing.
Yeah, the easy, and that's actually what's happening spiritually, Thomas. I believe, this is not a fact, I believe the way it kind of works is intellect. You grab hold of a problem, so you sort of see, like, you know how a horse runs with blinkers?
Yeah.
And you sort of focus on that. While you're there, your mind is predisposed, and so it does all the work over here. Because your mind is the thing that's holding you back.
Yeah.
It's your misuse of mixing the principles in an unwise way. And here's the beauty. With free will, you can redirect it any way you want when you see.
I didn't quite get the blinkers analogy. Can you say that one again? Sorry.
Well, if a horse wanders on a racetrack, they give him blinker, like they give him things that, so he can't see over here or over here, so he runs straight. So the intellect kind of grabs hold of you, and you put, that's as far, see, the intellect is form, and it's limited, whereas spiritual is limitless, formless. So you're paying attention here, and that's what the world says you should be doing, because that's where the problem is. And I've learned that if I don't pay attention to my problem, I'm going to have a bigger problem, or I'm in denial, all that nonsense stuff. So you're like this. So I'm concentrating so hard intellectually to solve that scenario, which is how you defined it. That spirit likes that, because then it can go in all over the side and say, no, I can work like a mechanic. Fix this, fix this. Then you notice a year later, you go, oh, gee, I've become a much nicer person. And that's what you want, to be a much nicer person. You're already a nice person, Thomas, but to be even a nicer person. So all of a sudden, your divorced wife or husband, no problem. they like you. Your kids who were pissed off at you, they like you.
Yeah.
Associates who said you're impossible to work with, they like you. And you have honesty. You're not afraid to say, no, I don't agree with that. And Christian will tell you, Harry Derbitsky does put his opinion out once or twice.
That's true.
That's very true. But that's me, Thomas. I'm not interested in just being on the soap opera. I'm just interested in honesty and integrity.
Mm.
I got to be true to me. Because if I listen to what other people tell me about me, I'm hooped. And yeah, once in a while someone says something and but what's happened in the past was that would take me to disappointment and insecurity, and then I would release all my bad habits. Now, I just let it go. Most of the time. No perfection, remember. You're not looking for perfection. You're just looking for a very graceful way to live.
Yeah.
And that's by being true to Thomas. Period.
Thank
true
you.
to yourself, son. And you've got lots of time on your hand. Don't waste it, like I did. Only 45 years. You know. Yeah.
Speaking of time, I notice, Harry, we're coming to the end of our time. Thomas, thank you for coming in, and I really loved what you just said right at the beginning of, just connecting into that warm and light feeling. It was, it's like, look in that direction. It's lovely. Harry, I think we really, probably just need to draw it to an end. And I don't know if you have any kind of closing remarks. It's been a lovely call, and I really appreciate you interrupting your holiday to make time for this. And thank you very much. And thank everybody who's joined us today.
This is a holiday, being on this talk. This is a holiday. The prep, how much prep? 0. That's how I prep everything. 0. And if it isn't fun, Harry doesn't do it. Period. That's Harry's mantra. Fun? Yes. No fun? Forget about it. Type of stuff. And also, I just want to mention my website is acttraining.biz, B-I-Z, and there's lots of talks and stuff and podcasts and so on there as well. So feel free to, and that's all, it's all free information and so on. And so what it's all about is to share feelings. And the way you want to grow is you have to share positive feelings. Now, Christian will say, well, Syd's always said that. You're just repeating his words and so on. Turns out it's not that easy, and then it is the only way to live. So if you have stuff that you have to decide on, don't listen to this. Listen to the feelings. And that will fit in. So that means sometimes you have to think a little bit about this and that requires the mind and the intellect to work in it. But it just naturally fits in harmony. When it dominates, which is ego, then you're going to have problems. Find the answer for yourself.
Well, that's a great place to leave it, Harry. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. There will be a recording of this call, and I will put a link to your website on the notes under the recording.
Oh, okay. And also the link to the website and also the YouTube channel.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll put a direct link to the one that you mentioned of Syd's one on addiction.
Okay, that would be perfect. Please, everybody, listen to that.
Sure.
And, that's the importance of Syd Banks.
Lovely. Well, listen, thank you very much. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of the day, and see you all soon. Thank you.